Brielle Thompson stood frozen in the narrow hallway of her apartment, staring at the white paper taped to her door. The words, "Final Eviction Notice," glared at her in bold red letters. She had 7 days. 7 days to come up with 3 months of back rent or she and her children would be on the street. Her hands trembled as she pulled the notice down and crumpled it against her chest. Behind the thin walls, she could hear her neighbor's television blaring, someone arguing upstairs, and the constant drip of the leaky faucet in her kitchen. This place was falling apart, but it was home. It was all she could afford on her salary as a medical records clerk at the community hospital. Brielle walked into the tiny living room and sank onto the worn green couch. The fabric was faded and torn in places, but she'd covered the worst spots with colorful blankets. Amara's homework was scattered across the coffee table, and Elijah's toy cars lined the windowsill. Her babies, 9 and 6 years old. What was she going to tell them? She pulled out her phone and opened her banking app. The screen showed $247.32. Her next paycheck wasn't for another week, and even then it would barely cover groceries and utilities. The child support from Curtis had stopped coming 8 months ago. He'd moved to another state with his new girlfriend and changed his number. Every text she sent bounced back. Every call went straight to voicemail. Her mother's words echoed in her head from their last conversation 2 weeks ago. "You never should have married that man. I told you he wasn't ready for a family. Now look at you, struggling and too proud to ask for help." Brielle had hung up without responding. She couldn't handle the judgment, the constant reminder that her life hadn't turned out the way everyone expected. She'd been the smart one in her family, the one who got good grades and stayed out of trouble. But somewhere between falling in love at 22 and getting divorced at 36, she'd become the cautionary tale. She looked at the eviction notice again and felt the tears coming. She'd been holding them back for months, pushing through each day with a smile for her children, pretending everything was fine. But it wasn't fine. Nothing was fine. The knock at the door startled her. Brielle quickly wiped her eyes and shoved the notice under a magazine on the coffee table. She wasn't expecting anyone. Through the peephole, she saw a tall white man in a navy blue suit standing in the dimly lit hallway. He looked completely out of place in her building. Brielle cracked the door open, keeping the chain lock engaged. "Can I help you?" The man smiled politely. He appeared to be in his mid-30s with sandy brown hair and kind eyes. "Good evening. I'm looking for Brielle Thompson." "Who's asking?" Brielle's grip tightened on the door. "My name is Tyler Bennett. I'm the executive assistant to Jonathan Wright, CEO of Wright Industries." He pulled out a business card and held it up to the crack in the door. "Mr. Wright has asked me to locate you regarding an important matter. He'd very much like to speak with you." Brielle's heart raced. Wright Industries was one of the largest tech companies in the state. Everyone knew the name. But she'd never worked there, never applied there, and couldn't imagine why their CEO would be looking for her. "I think you have the wrong person," Brielle said, starting to close the door. "Wait, please." Tyler's voice was urgent but gentle. "You are Brielle Thompson, correct? Formerly Brielle Jackson? You lived in Riverside 14 years ago?" Brielle froze. She hadn't used her maiden name in years, and Riverside was where she'd lived before getting married. "How do you know that?" "Mr. Wright has been searching for you for quite some time. He says you met once many years ago and that he owes you a debt. He's very eager to speak with you about it. Would you be willing to meet with him tomorrow morning?" "A debt?" Brielle tried to think back 14 years. She'd been 24, working 2 jobs to save money for community college. She didn't remember meeting anyone named Jonathan Wright, and she certainly didn't remember anyone owing her anything. "I don't understand," Brielle said. "What kind of debt?" Tyler shifted his weight, glancing down the hallway as if checking to make sure they were alone. "I'm not at liberty to discuss the details. Mr. Wright wishes to explain personally. But I can assure you this is legitimate. He's prepared to compensate you for your time. Would 10 o'clock tomorrow morning work? I can send a car to pick you up." Compensate her? Brielle's mind raced through possibilities. Maybe she'd witnessed something years ago and they needed her testimony. Maybe it was some kind of class action settlement. Or maybe this was a scam. People didn't just send assistants in expensive suits to random apartment buildings unless something was very wrong or very right. But then she thought about the eviction notice crumpled under the magazine. She thought about her empty bank account and her children sleeping in the next room. If there was even a chance this was real, even a chance that someone owed her money, she had to take it. "Okay," Brielle heard herself say. 10 o'clock is fine." Tyler's face brightened. "Excellent. I'll text you the details. May I have your phone number?" Brielle recited it, still not entirely sure she was making the right decision. Tyler typed it into his phone, then looked up with that same polite smile. "Thank you, Miss Thompson. Someone will be at your building at 9:30 to escort you to our offices. Please bring identification. Mr. Wright is very much looking forward to meeting you again." Again. The word hung in the air as Tyler walked away, his footsteps echoing down the concrete stairwell. Brielle closed the door and leaned against it, her mind spinning. She walked to her children's bedroom and peeked inside. Amara was curled up in her pink sheets, her braided hair spread across the pillow. Elijah was sprawled across his bed with his stuffed dinosaur tucked under one arm. They looked so peaceful, so innocent. They had no idea how close they were to losing everything. Brielle returned to the living room and picked up her phone. Tyler had already sent a text with the address of Wright Industries and instructions for tomorrow. The building was downtown in the business district she'd only ever driven past on her way to work. She opened her laptop and searched for Jonathan Wright. The first result showed a professional headshot of a young white man with dark hair and striking blue eyes. The article identified him as the 30-year-old CEO of Wright Industries, a company specializing in software development and digital security. He'd inherited the business from his father 5 years ago and had reportedly tripled its value since then. 30 years old. That meant he would have been 16 when they supposedly met. Brielle clicked through more articles, searching for something that might trigger her memory. There were photos of him at charity galas, cutting ribbons at new office openings, and speaking at tech conferences. He looked successful, confident, and completely unfamiliar. She was about to close the laptop when she found an older article from 6 years ago. Wright Industries CEO takes company public following father's death. Brielle read the first paragraph. Jonathan Wright's father had died suddenly of a heart attack when Jonathan was 24. His mother had passed away 10 years earlier from cancer when he was just a teenager. His mother died when he was a teenager. 14 years ago. Something flickered in Brielle's memory. A rainy night. A bench in Riverside Park. A young white boy sitting alone, soaking wet, crying like his world had ended. The memory came flooding back so suddenly that Brielle gasped. She'd been walking home from her evening shift at the diner, cutting through the park to save time. It was late, nearly midnight, and the rain was coming down hard. She'd seen someone sitting on a bench near the pond and almost kept walking. It wasn't safe to approach strangers at that hour. But something about the way he was sitting, hunched over with his head in his hands, made her stop. She'd walked closer and realized it was a teenage boy, maybe 15 or 16, crying so hard he was shaking. "Are you okay?" she'd asked, even though it was obvious he wasn't. He'd looked up at her with red, swollen eyes. "My mom died today." Those 4 words had broken Brielle's heart. She'd sat down beside him on that wet bench, not caring that the rain was soaking through her work uniform. She didn't know what to say, so she just listened. He told her everything. How his mother had been sick for months. How he'd been at the hospital when she passed. How his father was barely holding it together and couldn't even look at him because he looked too much like her. They'd sat there for over an hour. When the rain finally stopped, Brielle had walked him to a nearby 24-hour coffee shop and bought him hot chocolate with the tips from her pocket. She remembered thinking that $15 was a lot to spend when she was barely making rent, but this boy needed something warm more than she needed the money. Before they parted ways, he'd grabbed her hand. "Thank you for staying with me. I don't even know your name." "Brielle," she told him. "Brielle Jackson." "I'm Jonathan," he'd said. "Jonathan Wright. I'm going to remember you forever. Promise me you'll remember me too." She'd promised, thinking it was just something a grieving kid needed to hear. Then they'd gone their separate ways and she'd never seen him again. Until now. Brielle stared at the computer screen, at the professional photo of Jonathan Wright, and tried to reconcile it with the memory of that heartbroken teenager. It seemed impossible that they were the same person. But the timeline matched. His mother's death, his age, even the city where it happened. She closed her laptop and looked around her tiny apartment. If Jonathan Wright really was that boy from the park, and if he really remembered her after all these years, what did that mean? Why was he looking for her now? And what kind of debt could he possibly think he owed her for one night of kindness? Brielle picked up the eviction notice and smoothed it out on the coffee table. 7 days. Maybe this meeting would lead to nothing. Maybe Jonathan Wright would thank her, give her a gift card or a small check, and send her on her way. But maybe, just maybe, this was the answer to a prayer she'd been too afraid to speak out loud. She thought about Tyler's words, "He's prepared to compensate you for your time." For the first time in months, Brielle felt a tiny spark of hope. She didn't know what tomorrow would bring, but she knew she had to show up and find out. That night, she lay in bed staring at the ceiling, unable to sleep. Her mind kept drifting back to that rainy night 14 years ago. She'd been so young then, just trying to survive, working multiple jobs and dreaming of a better future. She never imagined that one small act of kindness could somehow circle back to her like this. At some point she must have drifted off, because when she opened her eyes again, sunlight was streaming through the thin curtains. Amara was shaking her shoulder. "Mom, you're going to be late for work." Brielle sat up quickly, her heart racing. Then she remembered. She'd requested the morning off, telling her supervisor she had a personal appointment. She'd have to use unpaid leave since she'd burned through all her sick days. "It's okay, baby. I have the morning off. Is your brother awake?" "He's eating cereal and watching cartoons." Brielle smiled and kissed her daughter's forehead. "Go get ready for school. I'll make you eggs before the bus comes." As Amara ran off, Brielle's phone buzzed on the nightstand. A text from an unknown number. "Good morning, Miss Thompson. Your car will arrive at 9:30 as scheduled. Looking forward to seeing you. Tyler Bennett." Brielle took a deep breath. This was really happening. How many of us push away help because we're too proud or too scared to believe we deserve it? Have you ever refused kindness only to regret it later? Drop a comment below and let me know your thoughts. And if this story is touching your heart, please subscribe so you never miss an ending like this one. The black town car looked completely out of place, parked in front of Brielle's building. Neighbors were already peeking through windows and whispering in doorways as she walked down the front steps at exactly 9:30. She'd chosen her best outfit, a maroon blouse and black slacks that she usually saved for parent-teacher conferences. Her natural hair was pulled back in a neat bun, and she'd applied minimal makeup to hide the dark circles under her eyes. The driver, an older white gentleman in a black suit, opened the back door for her. "Miss Thompson?" "Yes." Brielle slid into the car, sinking into leather seats that probably cost more than her monthly rent. The interior smelled like expensive cologne and new car. The drive downtown took 20 minutes. Brielle watched the city transform through the tinted windows as they left her working-class neighborhood behind and entered the gleaming business district. Wright Industries occupied the top 15 floors of a steel and glass tower that reflected the morning sun like a beacon. Tyler was waiting for her in the lobby. He greeted her warmly and led her to a private elevator that required a key card to operate. They rode up in silence, the elevator moving so smoothly that Brielle barely felt the motion. When the doors opened on the 30th floor, she stepped into a reception area that looked like something from a magazine. Everything was modern and clean, with floor-to-ceiling windows offering views of the entire city. "Mr. Wright's office is this way," Tyler said, leading her down a hallway lined with abstract art. "Can I get you anything? Coffee? Water?" "Water would be nice." Brielle's mouth felt dry. Her hands were sweating. Tyler stopped in front of a heavy wooden door and knocked twice. A voice from inside called out, "Come in." The office was enormous. A massive desk sat near the windows, but the space also included a sitting area with a blue sofa and chairs arranged around a glass coffee table. The man standing by the windows turned around, and Brielle felt her breath catch. It was him. The boy from the park. Older, more polished, but those same blue eyes that had been so full of pain that night were now looking at her with an expression she couldn't quite read. "Brielle," Jonathan said softly, and even his voice carried echoes of that grieving teenager. "Thank you for coming." Tyler quietly placed a bottle of water on the coffee table and excused himself, closing the door behind him. Brielle stood awkwardly near the entrance, not sure whether to sit or speak first. Jonathan walked toward her slowly, as if afraid he might startle her. "I wasn't sure you'd remember me." "I didn't at first," Brielle admitted. "Not until I looked you up last night. But I remember now. The park. The rain. Your mother." Something in Jonathan's expression softened. "You stayed with me that night when you didn't have to. You bought me hot chocolate with money you probably needed for yourself. And you listened. You didn't try to fix anything or tell me it would all be okay. You just listened." Brielle felt uncomfortable with the weight of his gratitude. Anyone would have done the same. But they didn't. Jonathan gestured to the sitting area. "Please sit down. I have so much to tell you." Brielle perched on the edge of the blue sofa while Jonathan took one of the chairs across from her. Up close, she could see the expensive cut of his charcoal gray suit, the platinum watch on his wrist, and the confidence that came from years of success. But underneath it all, she could still see traces of that broken teenager. "After that night," Jonathan began, "I went home and told my father about you. He was deep in his own grief, but he wrote down your name. He said that kindness in the darkest moments should never be forgotten. We tried to find you but you'd moved away from Riverside. No forwarding address. It was like you'd vanished. I got married, Brielle explained. Moved to a different part of the city. Changed my name. Jonathan nodded. I never stopped looking. When I took over the company 5 years ago, I hired investigators to track you down. It took time but we finally found you 3 months ago. 3 months. Brielle's mind spun. He'd known where she was for 3 months and was just now reaching out? I wanted to be sure, Jonathan continued as if reading her mind. I needed to verify it was really you and that you'd want to hear from me. I also needed to understand your current situation so I could help appropriately. Brielle stiffened. Help how? I know about the eviction notice. I know about your ex-husband and the missing child support. I know you work 60 hours a week just to barely make ends meet. He leaned forward, his expression earnest. Brielle, you saved me that night in a way you probably don't understand. My mother's death nearly destroyed me. I was angry, lost, and seriously considering doing something terrible to myself. But you showed me that strangers could be kind. That the world wasn't entirely dark. You gave me a reason to keep going. Tears pricked at Brielle's eyes but she blinked them back. I'm glad I could help. But that was 14 years ago. You don't owe me anything for that. I disagree. Jonathan stood and walked to his desk, picking up a folder. He returned and placed it on the coffee table in front of her. I want to clear your debts. All of them. The back rent, the medical bills I know you have from when your daughter was sick last year, the student loans from your 2 years of community college. Everything. Brielle's hands trembled as she opened the folder. Inside were copies of bills she'd been struggling to pay for months. At the bottom was a summary sheet. The total came to $87,000. She closed the folder quickly. I can't accept this. Why not? Because it's too much. Because I don't take charity. Because I don't even know you. You knew me when it mattered most, Jonathan said quietly. And this isn't charity. It's a debt repaid. You spent money you didn't have to buy me hot chocolate. You spent time you couldn't afford to sit with a stranger in the rain. Let me give you back what you gave me, peace of mind. Brielle shook her head. I appreciate the offer, I really do. But I have to do this on my own. I have to prove to myself and my kids that I can take care of them. You already have proven that, Jonathan countered. You've been doing it alone for years. There's no shame in accepting help. There is when it comes from pity. The words came out harsher than Brielle intended. Jonathan's jaw tightened. I have never pitied you. I admire you. Do you have any idea how rare it is to find someone who gives without expecting anything in return? You did that for me and I want to do it for you. Please, let me help. Brielle stood up, her heart pounding. Everything in her wanted to say yes. She wanted to grab that folder, sign whatever papers he had, and walk out of here debt-free. But the voice in her head, the one that sounded like her mother and her ex-husband and every person who'd ever told her she wasn't good enough, whispered that this was wrong. That she'd be selling herself out. That she'd be proving everyone right who said she couldn't make it on her own. I can't, she whispered. I'm sorry. She walked to the door, her vision blurring with tears. Behind her, she heard Jonathan stand. Brielle, wait. She paused with her hand on the doorknob. I understand why you're saying no, Jonathan said. I respect it even if I don't agree with it. But please at least let me do one thing. Let me pay for your kids' school expenses this year. Field trips, supplies, whatever they need. You don't have to tell them it's from me. Consider it an investment in their future. Brielle turned around. Why do you care so much? Because you cared about me when no one else did. And because those kids deserve stability. Let me give them that even if you won't take anything for yourself. Brielle wanted to refuse. Every instinct told her to walk away. But then she thought about Amara asking for new shoes last week, and how Brielle had to tell her they'd have to wait until next month. She thought about Elijah's class field trip to the Science Museum that cost $25, money she didn't have. Just their school expenses, Brielle heard herself say. Nothing else. Jonathan's face broke into a smile. Deal. I'll have Tyler coordinate with their schools directly. You won't have to worry about it. Thank you. The words felt heavy on her tongue. Can I ask you one more thing? Jonathan walked closer. Would you be willing to have dinner with me sometime? Not as a business meeting. Just as two people catching up. I'd like to know how your life has been these past 14 years. Brielle hesitated. Having dinner with a billionaire felt dangerous, like stepping into a world where she didn't belong. But something in his eyes, that same vulnerability she'd seen all those years ago, made her nod. Okay, dinner. But somewhere casual. I don't do fancy restaurants, Jonathan laughed. Casual it is. I'll have Tyler reach out to schedule something. As Brielle left the building and climbed back into the waiting car, she felt conflicted. She'd refused the help she desperately needed, but accepted help for her children. Was that compromise or cowardice? She didn't know. All she knew was that Jonathan Wright had walked back into her life after 14 years, and somehow she had a feeling things were about to change in ways she couldn't predict. When she got home, there was a new notice on her door. This one wasn't an eviction. It was a letter from the management office stating that her account had been brought current and she no longer owed back rent. Brielle crumpled the letter in her fist, angry and grateful all at once. Jonathan had done it anyway. He'd paid her debts without her permission. She should have been furious. Instead, she sank onto her green couch and cried tears of relief. Brielle called the number on Tyler's business card the next morning. He answered on the second ring. Miss Thompson, good morning. How can I help you? Your boss paid my rent. Brielle tried to keep her voice even. I specifically told him I didn't want that. There was a pause on the other end. Mr. Wright values your relationship and wants to ensure you have stability. He believed this was the right thing to do. He should have asked me first. With respect, Miss Thompson, he did ask. You said no. So he made a decision to help anyway. Brielle closed her eyes and counted to 5. Can I speak with him directly? Mr. Wright is in meetings all morning, but I can schedule a call for this afternoon. Would 2 o'clock work? Fine. At exactly 2 o'clock her phone rang. Jonathan's name appeared on the screen. Before you yell at me, Jonathan said as soon as she answered, let me explain. You went behind my back. I gave you stability. There's a difference. His voice was calm but firm. Brielle, you were 7 days away from being evicted. Your children would have been homeless. I couldn't let that happen. That wasn't your choice to make. Actually, it was. You helped me when I was at my lowest. I'm helping you at yours. If that makes me controlling or arrogant, I'll accept that judgment. But I won't apologize for keeping your kids off the street. Brielle wanted to argue, but the words stuck in her throat. He was right. She'd been so focused on her pride that she'd been willing to let her children suffer for it. I don't need saving, she said quietly. I know you don't. But everyone needs help sometimes. Even you. They sat in silence for a moment. Finally, Brielle sighed. Thank you for paying the rent. But please don't do anything else without asking me first. I'll try. Jonathan paused. Are we still on for dinner? When were you thinking? Tomorrow night? There's a great burger place near the riverfront. Very casual. Best sweet potato fries in the city. Despite herself, Brielle smiled. Okay. Tomorrow night. The next evening, Jonathan picked her up in his own car, a modest blue sedan that surprised her. She'd expected something flashy and expensive. I save the fancy cars for business events, Jonathan explained as they drove. This is more my style. The restaurant was exactly as promised. Casual, cozy, and packed with families. They sat in a corner booth and ordered burgers and fries. Brielle felt herself relaxing as they talked about everything except money and debt. Tell me about your kids, Jonathan said, stealing one of her sweet potato fries. Brielle's face lit up. Amara is my oldest. She's 9, smart as a whip, loves reading and art. She wants to be a teacher when she grows up. Elijah is 6, all energy and curiosity. He's obsessed with dinosaurs and space. Talks my ear off about black holes and asteroid belts. They sound amazing. Do they know about me? Not yet. I didn't want to confuse them. Jonathan nodded. I understand. But I'd like to meet them sometime if you're comfortable with that. Why? Because they're part of your life. And I'd like to be part of your life too. Brielle's heart skipped. Jonathan, I'm 38. You're 30. I have 2 kids and an ex-husband and a whole lot of baggage. What could you possibly want with me? Everything, he said simply. You're kind, resilient, and real. You don't care about my money. You see me as a person, not a bank account. Do you know how rare that is? Brielle looked down at her plate. I can't give you what women your age can give you. I'm past my prime. I'm tired all the time. I have stretch marks and responsibilities and... Stop. Jonathan reached across the table and took her hand. You're beautiful inside and out. Age doesn't matter to me. Kids don't matter to me. What matters is that you make me feel like I did that night in the park. Seen, understood, and cared for. I've been looking for that feeling ever since, and I've never found it with anyone else. Brielle pulled her hand back gently. You barely know me. Then let me get to know you. No pressure, no expectations. Just time. Over the next few weeks, Jonathan became a constant presence in Brielle's life. He showed up at the hospital cafeteria during her lunch break with takeout from her favorite places. He sent flowers to her apartment with notes that made her laugh. He attended Elijah's school play about community helpers, sitting in the back row and clapping louder than anyone when Elijah came on stage in his construction worker costume. But he also did things Brielle didn't ask for. Her car mysteriously got repaired while she was at work one day. The broken air conditioning in her apartment was fixed overnight. Groceries started appearing on her doorstep every Sunday morning. Brielle confronted him each time. "You have to stop," she said one Saturday afternoon when she found a brand new laptop on her kitchen table with a note. "For Amara's schoolwork." "Jay." "What?" "She needs it. Her teacher said she can't keep up in computer class because you don't have internet at home." "How do you even know that?" Jonathan had the grace to look sheepish. "I may have spoken with her teacher during parents' night. You weren't supposed to be there. You brought me as your +1, remember?" Brielle had introduced him as a friend, nothing more. But Amara had grabbed his hand immediately and dragged him around to see her artwork on the walls. Elijah had insisted Jonathan sit with them during the classroom presentation. "They like you," Brielle admitted. "Maybe too much." "Is that a bad thing?" "It is if you disappear. Kids get attached. I can't let them get hurt." "I'm not going anywhere," Jonathan said firmly. "I promise you that." But promises were easy to make and hard to keep. Brielle had learned that the hard way. 3 months after their first dinner, Jonathan had become part of the family routine. He picked up the kids from school twice a week, giving Brielle time to run errands or just breathe. He helped Elijah build a volcano for the science fair and sat through Amara's hour-long presentation about her favorite books. On a Saturday afternoon, Jonathan took all 3 of them to the park. Not the fancy downtown park with perfectly manicured lawns, but the neighborhood park near Brielle's apartment where the equipment was rusty and the grass was patchy. Elijah ran straight for the swings while Amara climbed onto the monkey bars. Brielle and Jonathan sat on a bench nearby watching them play. "They're happy," Jonathan observed. "They are. You're good with them." "I meant what I said before. I'm not going anywhere." Brielle watched Elijah pumping his legs trying to swing higher. Their father said the same thing. Then he left without looking back. "I'm not Curtis." "I know. But trauma doesn't care about logic. I keep waiting for you to wake up and realize this is too much work. A ready-made family with someone who's too old for you." Jonathan turned to face her fully. "Brielle, look at me." She did, meeting his blue eyes. "I was 16 when you showed me kindness. I was broken, angry, and lost. You didn't see a rich kid or a future CEO. You saw a human being in pain and you helped. That's who you are. That's who you'll always be. And those kids over there? They're the luckiest children in the world because they have you as their mother." Tears spilled down Brielle's cheeks. "Why are you so good to us?" "Because you deserve it. Because they deserve it. And because I'm falling in love with you." The words hung in the air between them. Before Brielle could respond, Elijah came running over, out of breath. "Mr. Jonathan, can you push me on the swing? I want to go super high." Jonathan stood, ruffling Elijah's hair. "Let's see how high you can go." Brielle watched them walk away, her heart pounding. He'd said he was falling in love with her. Actually said the words out loud. And instead of fear, she felt something else. Hope. Amara appeared beside her, sweaty and smiling. "Mom, do you like Mr. Jonathan?" "Of course I do, baby. He's a good friend." "But do you like him? Like how people like each other in movies?" Brielle pulled her daughter close. "Why do you ask?" "Because he looks at you the way Daddy used to look at you. Before he left. But nicer." Out of the mouths of children. Brielle kissed Amara's forehead. "Mr. Jonathan is very nice. But things are complicated." "Why?" "Because I'm a grown-up and grown-up feelings are messy." Amara seemed to consider this. "I hope he stays. Elijah really likes him." "I do too." "Me too, baby. Me too." That evening, after Jonathan dropped them off at home, Brielle found an envelope on the passenger seat of his car. Inside was a check for $5,000 with a note. "For emergencies. No arguments. Jay." She texted him immediately, "We talked about this." His response came seconds later, "It's for peace of mind. Mine and yours. Keep it just in case." Brielle tucked the check into her wallet. For once she didn't argue. The following Tuesday, Curtis showed up. Brielle was putting groceries away when someone knocked on the door. She looked through the peephole and felt her stomach drop. Curtis stood in the hallway looking exactly as she remembered, tall, handsome, and completely irresponsible. She considered not answering, but Amara had already heard the knock and was walking toward the door. "Who is it, Mom?" "Go to your room, baby." "But..." "Now, Amara." Something in Brielle's tone made her daughter obey. Once Amara was safely down the hall, Brielle opened the door but didn't invite Curtis inside. "What do you want?" "Nice to see you too." Curtis leaned against the doorframe. "I heard through the grapevine that you're doing pretty well these days. New boyfriend who's loaded?" "That's none of your business." "It is when it involves my kids. Word is some rich white guy is playing house with my family." Brielle's hands clenched into fists. "You don't get to call them your family. You abandoned them. You stopped sending support. You changed your number and moved away without telling them where you were going. I needed time to figure things out. For 3 years." Curtis had the decency to look away. "I know I messed up, but I want to make it right. I want to see my kids." "Absolutely not. You can't keep them from me. I have rights. Rights you gave up when you disappeared. Get off my doorstep, Curtis." "I'm serious, Brielle. I want joint custody. And if you don't agree, I'll take you to court." Fear shot through her. Curtis didn't want the kids. He wanted leverage. He wanted money. And now that he thought she had access to money through Jonathan, he was circling back like a vulture. "Leave. Now." Curtis smirked. "I'll be in touch. Tell the kids Daddy said hello." He walked away whistling as if he hadn't just threatened to rip apart her world. Brielle closed the door and leaned against it, shaking. Her phone rang. "Jonathan." "Hey," she answered, trying to keep her voice steady. "What's wrong?" How did he always know? Curtis showed up. "Where? At your apartment?" "Yeah. He wants custody. He heard about you and thinks he can get money out of this." There was a long silence. When Jonathan spoke again, his voice was ice cold. "That's not going to happen. He has parental rights, Jonathan. Legally, he can fight for custody. Not if he can't afford a lawyer. Not if his record shows he's been unreliable and absent. Not if we present evidence that he's only doing this out of greed. Yes, I'm not letting him take those kids, Brielle. I'm not letting him hurt you. Do you understand me?" Brielle closed her eyes. She should tell him to stay out of it. She should say she could handle this herself. But the truth was she couldn't. Curtis had resources now. His new girlfriend came from money. If he wanted to fight dirty, he would. "Okay," she whispered. "We'll fight him together. I'll have my lawyers on it first thing tomorrow. In the meantime, document everything. If he shows up again, call the police." "And Brielle?" "Yeah. You're not alone in this." After they hung up, Brielle stood in her living room and tried not to cry. She'd spent years being alone, handling every crisis by herself. Having someone step in to help felt foreign and terrifying and wonderful all at once. Amara peeked out from the hallway. "Was that Daddy?" Brielle pulled her daughter into a hug. "Yes, baby." "Is he coming back?" "I don't know. But if he does, everything will be okay. I promise." She just hoped it was a promise she could keep. If you've ever been betrayed by someone you trusted, you know how hard it is to open your heart again. Do you think Brielle should trust Jonathan completely, or is she right to be cautious? Comment your opinion below and hit subscribe to see how this unfolds. Jonathan's lawyers moved quickly. Within 2 days, they'd filed paperwork documenting Curtis's absence and lack of financial support. They subpoenaed bank records showing he'd made no effort to contribute to his children's welfare. They gathered statements from the kids' teachers, neighbors, and even Brielle's employer, all attesting to her dedication as a mother. But preparing a legal defense was expensive. Brielle sat in the law office conference room, staring at the retainer agreement. $25,000 just to start. "I can't afford this," she told the lead attorney, a sharp-eyed woman named Patricia Henderson. "Mr. Wright is covering all legal expenses," Patricia replied smoothly. "Of course he is." Brielle looked at Jonathan, who sat beside her in a green button-down shirt. "You're doing it again. This is different. Curtis is threatening your family. I won't let him win." "But why? Why do you care this much?" Jonathan reached for her hand across the conference table. "Because you matter to me. Because those kids matter to me. Because watching you struggle when I can help is impossible. Please, Brielle. Let me do this." Patricia cleared her throat. "Miss Thompson, I understand your hesitation. But Mr. Wright is right. Curtis has the resources to draw this out and make it painful. We need to show the court immediately that you have stability and support." Brielle looked at the contract again. $25,000 was more money than she'd make in 6 months. But losing her children? That was unthinkable. "Okay," she said finally. "Do whatever it takes." The custody battle consumed the next 3 months. Curtis's lawyers painted him as a father who'd made mistakes but wanted to reconnect. They argued that Brielle was alienating the children by refusing visitation. They even suggested that her relationship with Jonathan was inappropriate and unstable. The accusations stung. Brielle sat through deposition after deposition, answering invasive questions about her finances, her parenting, and her relationship with Jonathan. Each session left her exhausted and raw. Jonathan was there for every hearing. He sat in the back of the courtroom when he wasn't allowed at the plaintiff's table, his presence a steady anchor. He held Brielle when she cried after particularly brutal cross-examinations. He played with the kids when they sensed their mother's stress and acted out. One evening after a long court day, Jonathan drove Brielle back to her apartment. She was silent the entire ride, staring out the window at the passing streetlights. "Talk to me," Jonathan said as he pulled up in front of her building. "I'm tired. That's all." "It's more than that." Brielle turned to face him. "Curtis's lawyer asked me today if I was using you for your money. If I was teaching my children to rely on handouts instead of hard work. And you know what the worst part is? I don't know how to answer that. Am I using you? Have I become the person my mother always warned me about?" Jonathan unbuckled his seatbelt and turned to face her fully. "You are the most self-sufficient, hard-working person I know. Accepting help doesn't make you weak or opportunistic. It makes you human. But where's the line? When does accepting help become dependency? When you stop trying. When you give up on yourself. But you haven't done that. You work full-time. You raise 2 kids alone. You fight for them every single day. I'm just making the fight a little easier." Brielle wiped her eyes. "I don't deserve you." "Yes, you do. Stop telling yourself otherwise." They sat in silence for a moment. Then Jonathan leaned over and kissed her forehead, so gently it felt like a promise. "I should go inside," Brielle whispered, but she didn't move. "Or," Jonathan said carefully, "you could come to my place for dinner. Real dinner, not takeout. I'll cook. We can just talk. No kids, no lawyers, no stress. Just us." Brielle knew she should say no. Going to his home alone felt like crossing a line. But she was so tired of being strong all the time. She wanted one night where she didn't have to worry or plan or protect. Okay. Jonathan's penthouse was nothing like she'd imagined. She'd expected marble and gold and cold modern art. Instead, she found warm wood floors, comfortable furniture, and walls covered with family photos. There was a picture of a young Jonathan with his parents, everyone smiling. Another of him at his college graduation. Several of him with business partners and friends. "This is nice," Brielle said, running her hand along a navy blue couch. "It feels like a home. That's what I was going for. I spend enough time in sterile office buildings. I wanted this space to feel different." He cooked pasta with homemade marinara sauce while Brielle sat at the kitchen island, sipping red wine and watching him work. He moved with confidence like someone who genuinely enjoyed cooking. "Where did you learn to cook?" Brielle asked. "My mother. She loved being in the kitchen. After she died, cooking became a way to feel close to her again." "Do you miss her?" "Every day. But it's different now. The grief isn't as sharp. It's more like a constant ache that I've learned to live with." "I'm sorry you lost her so young." Jonathan set a plate of pasta in front of her. "If she hadn't died, I wouldn't have been in that park. I wouldn't have met you. Maybe everything happens for a reason." They ate and talked for hours. Brielle found herself sharing things she'd never told anyone. About her difficult relationship with her mother. About how Curtis's abandonment had made her question everything about herself. About her fear that she was fundamentally unlovable. "You're not unlovable," Jonathan said firmly. "Curtis was an idiot who didn't appreciate what he had. That's on him, not you." "How can you be so sure?" "Because I see you, Brielle. I see how you love your kids, how you fight for them, how you sacrifice everything to give them a good life. That's not someone who's unlovable. That's someone who's extraordinary." Brielle felt tears building again. "You make it sound so simple." "It is simple. You just won't let yourself believe it." He stood and walked around the island, stopping in front of her. He took her hands and pulled her to her feet. "I need to tell you something," Jonathan said. "I've been holding back because I didn't want to pressure you. But you need to hear this. I'm in love with you, Brielle. Not falling, not starting to. I am completely, deeply, irrevocably in love with you. I love your strength and your vulnerability. I love the way you put everyone else first. I love watching you be a mother. I love the way you challenge me and call me out when I'm being too much. I love everything about you." Brielle's heart raced. "Jonathan. You don't have to say it back. I just needed you to know. But Brielle realized in that moment that she did want to say it back. Because somewhere between the eviction notice and the custody battle, between the late-night talks and the quiet moments watching him with her children, she'd fallen in love too. I love you, she whispered. I'm scared and confused and terrified, but I love you. Jonathan's smile was like sunrise. He cupped her face in his hands and kissed her properly for the first time. It was gentle and sweet and perfect. When they finally pulled apart, Brielle was breathless. Stay tonight, Jonathan said. No pressure. I have guest rooms. I just want you here. Brielle knew she should go home to her kids. But her mother was watching them overnight, and for once, Brielle wanted to be selfish. She wanted one night to just be a woman in love, not a struggling single mother. Okay, she said. I'll stay. They spent the rest of the evening on the couch, wrapped in each other's arms, talking and kissing and simply being together. For the first time in years, Brielle felt safe. Not just physically safe, but emotionally safe. Like she could finally let her guard down. When she woke up the next morning in Jonathan's guest room, she found a note on the nightstand. Had to go to an early meeting. Breakfast is in the kitchen. Help yourself to anything. I'll call you later. I love you. Jay. Brielle held the note against her chest and smiled. Maybe, just maybe, she deserved this happiness after all. The custody hearing was scheduled for a Thursday morning in late September. Brielle wore her best navy blue dress and arrived at the courthouse with Jonathan by her side. Patricia and her legal team were already waiting, armed with binders full of documentation. Curtis showed up 10 minutes late with his lawyer, a smug older white man named Richard Powell. Curtis wore a suit that looked new and expensive, probably paid for by his girlfriend's family. He didn't even glance at Brielle as he walked past. The hearing lasted 4 hours. Both sides presented their cases. Curtis's lawyer argued that he'd been dealing with mental health issues after the divorce and needed time to recover. They presented letters from a therapist Curtis had started seeing 2 months ago. They showed proof of a new job and an apartment lease. My client is ready to be a father again, Richard Powell told the judge. He's gotten his life together and wants to share custody of his children. Patricia stood and calmly demolished every argument. She presented the years of bank statements showing zero support. She had character witnesses testify about Brielle's dedication. She even had Curtis's former employer on record stating that he'd quit without notice to move across state with his girlfriend. Your Honor, Patricia said, Mr. Davis has had 3 years to get his life together. He chose not to. He abandoned his children emotionally and financially. Now that he's heard Ms. Thompson has a successful relationship, he suddenly wants custody. This isn't about the children's welfare. This is about control and money. The judge, a stern-looking black woman in her 50s, listened carefully to both sides. When the presentations ended, she called a brief recess to review the materials. Brielle stepped into the hallway, her hands shaking. Jonathan immediately pulled her into a hug. You did great in there, he murmured into her hair. What if the judge sides with him? What if I lose them? You won't. The evidence is on our side. Curtis appeared at the end of the hallway. He walked toward them slowly, that same smirk on his face. Brielle, can we talk? Alone. Anything you have to say, you can say in front of Jonathan. Curtis's eyes flicked to Jonathan with barely concealed jealousy. So you really are shacking up with this guy? How long did you wait after I left? A week? A month? Don't, Jonathan said quietly, but there was steel in his voice. Don't talk to her like that. I can talk to my ex-wife however I want. And you, rich boy, need to stay out of business that doesn't concern you. My relationship with Brielle and her children is very much my business. Curtis laughed. Her children. Not yours. You think playing dad for a few months makes you family? Those are my kids. My blood. And when I get custody, you'll be nothing but a memory. Brielle stepped between them before the tension could escalate. You're not getting custody, Curtis. You gave up that right when you walked away. We'll see what the judge says. When they returned to the courtroom, the judge had made her decision. She looked at both parties seriously. I've reviewed all the evidence and testimony presented today. Mr. Davis, while I appreciate that you've made recent efforts to improve your circumstances, 3 years of complete absence cannot be easily overlooked. Your children don't know you. You've provided no financial support and made no effort to maintain a relationship with them. Curtis's lawyer started to object, but the judge held up her hand. However, I do believe children benefit from having both parents involved when possible. Therefore, I'm granting Ms. Thompson full physical custody with Mr. Davis having supervised visitation rights. He may see the children twice a month for 4 hours each visit. These visits will be supervised by a court-appointed monitor. After 6 months of consistent attendance and proof of continued employment and housing stability, we can revisit the custody arrangement. Brielle felt like she could breathe for the first time in months. It wasn't perfect, but it was something. Curtis couldn't take her babies away. Curtis stood abruptly. This is ridiculous. They're my kids. Mr. Davis, sit down, the judge said sharply. You're lucky I'm granting any visitation given your history. If you want a better arrangement in the future, I suggest you prove yourself worthy of it. This hearing is adjourned. In the hallway afterward, Patricia congratulated Brielle. That was the best outcome we could hope for. Supervised visitation means he can't manipulate the children or cause problems. And most likely, he'll lose interest after a few months when he realizes he actually has to show up. Brielle hugged her lawyer tightly. Thank you. For everything. After Patricia left, Brielle turned to Jonathan. He was already watching her with that soft expression that made her heart skip. You won, he said. We won. I couldn't have done this without you. Yes, you could have. But I'm glad I was here. They walked out of the courthouse into bright afternoon sunshine. Brielle tilted her face up to the warmth, feeling lighter than she had in months. I need to pick up the kids from my mom's, she said. Want to come with me? Always. When they arrived at her mother's house, Amara and Elijah came running out the front door. They threw themselves at Brielle, nearly knocking her over. Mom, how was court? Amara asked. Are we okay? Brielle knelt down and hugged both children close. We're more than okay, baby. We're perfect. Her mother stood in the doorway, arms crossed. She was a tall, elegant black woman who'd never quite approved of any of Brielle's life choices. So that's him? Her mother asked, nodding at Jonathan. The white billionaire everyone's talking about? Mom, not now. I'm just saying, baby, be careful. Men like that don't stay with women like us. Jonathan stepped forward, extending his hand. Mrs. Jackson, I'm Jonathan Wright. It's nice to finally meet you. Brielle's mother looked at his hand for a long moment before shaking it. We'll see. Despite the cold reception, Jonathan remained polite and gracious. He helped Brielle load the kids into her car and even made Elijah laugh with a story about a business meeting gone wrong. As they drove away, Amara piped up from the back seat. Is Mr. Jonathan your boyfriend now, Mom? Brielle glanced at Jonathan, who was grinning. Would that be okay with you? Yes, both kids chorused together. Then yes, he's my boyfriend. Jonathan reached over and squeezed her hand. Everything wasn't perfect. Curtis would still be a presence in their lives, her mother still didn't approve, and the age difference still made people whisper. But for the first time, Brielle believed that everything would work out. Because she wasn't alone anymore. And neither were her children. Curtis didn't show up for his first supervised visitation. Or his second. Or his third. The court-appointed supervisor called Brielle each time to inform her that the children's father was a no-show. Amara seemed relieved. Elijah was confused but didn't ask too many questions. Why doesn't Daddy want to see us? He asked one night before bed. Brielle chose her words carefully. Sometimes grown-ups have a hard time doing what they're supposed to do. But that's not your fault, baby. Your dad loves you. He just has some things to work through. Mr. Jonathan always shows up. Yes, he does. Can Mr. Jonathan be my dad instead? The question pierced Brielle's heart. We'll see, sweetheart. Now go to sleep. After 4 missed visits, Curtis's lawyer filed a motion to suspend the visitation requirement, claiming Curtis's work schedule made it impossible to attend. Patricia immediately countered, arguing that Curtis's repeated absences proved he wasn't committed to being a parent. The judge scheduled another hearing for November. This time, Curtis didn't even show up to the courthouse. Your Honor, Patricia addressed the court, Mr. Davis has made it abundantly clear that he has no interest in parenting his children. He's missed every scheduled visitation and didn't bother to appear today. We moved to have his parental rights limited to phone calls only, with the option to revisit in 1 year if he demonstrates consistent interest. The judge agreed. Curtis Davis would have no visitation rights for 12 months. If he wanted to see his children after that, he'd have to petition the court again and prove he'd maintained steady contact. Brielle walked out of the courthouse feeling both victorious and sad. Her children deserved better than a father who only showed up when there was something in it for him. Ice cream? Jonathan suggested. I think we need to celebrate. They picked up the kids from school early and took them to a local ice cream shop. Elijah got chocolate with sprinkles. Amara chose strawberry. Jonathan and Brielle shared a sundae while the children chattered happily about their day. Are you sad Daddy didn't come to visit? Amara asked suddenly, looking at her mother. I'm sad for you guys. But I'm not surprised. We're not sad, Amara said matter-of-factly. We have Mr. Jonathan now. Jonathan looked at Brielle with such tenderness that she had to blink back tears. After ice cream, they went back to Brielle's apartment. The kids immediately disappeared into their room to play, leaving the adults alone. They're adjusting well, Jonathan observed. Better than I am, honestly. I keep waiting for the other shoe to drop. What do you mean? Brielle sat on the green couch and pulled her knees to her chest. This feels too good to be real. Every time I start to relax, I remember that I'm 38, you're 30, and eventually you're going to realize you want something different. Jonathan sat beside her and turned her face toward him. How many times do I have to tell you? I'm not going anywhere. But what if you change your mind? What if you meet someone younger, someone without kids and baggage and… Stop. Just stop. Jonathan's voice was firm. I know you've been hurt. I know Curtis destroyed your ability to trust. But I am not him. I've proven that over and over. When are you going to believe me? I'm trying. Try harder. Because I'm all in, Brielle. I love you. I love your kids. I want to build a life with you. The age difference doesn't matter. Your past doesn't matter. The only thing that matters is right now, and right now, I'm choosing you. Brielle felt the last of her walls crumbling. I'm scared. So am I. Love is scary. But it's worth it. She leaned into him, resting her head on his shoulder. Okay. I'll try to stop waiting for you to leave. Good. Because I'm going to be here so long you'll get sick of me. Brielle laughed through her tears. I don't think that's possible. Over the next few months, their relationship deepened. Jonathan essentially moved into Brielle's apartment, spending most nights on that old green couch because the kids weren't ready for him to share their mom's room yet. He was patient about it, never pushing for more than Brielle was ready to give. He attended every school event, helped with homework, and took the family on weekend adventures. They went to museums, parks, and movies. He taught Elijah how to ride a bike without training wheels. He helped Amara prepare for her school's spelling bee, quizzing her on words until she knew them by heart. Brielle's co-workers noticed the change in her. She smiled more. She didn't look exhausted all the time. When her friend Tracy asked about it during lunch one day, Brielle couldn't help but gush. He's amazing, Tracy. He's everything Curtis wasn't. Patient, kind, present. The kids adore him. And you love him. I really do. It's terrifying. Tracy reached across the table and squeezed her hand. You deserve this, girl. Stop punishing yourself for being happy. But happiness felt fragile. Every night before bed, Brielle said a small prayer that this wouldn't end. That Jonathan would keep showing up. That her children wouldn't get their hearts broken again. One December evening, Jonathan showed up at her door with a key. What's this? Brielle asked, turning it over in her hand. A key to my penthouse. I want you to have it. You and the kids. Move in with me. Brielle's stomach flipped. Jonathan, that's a huge step. I know. But I'm ready if you are. The penthouse has plenty of space. Each kid could have their own room. There's a building gym and pool. Better schools in that district. And you wouldn't have to worry about rent or eviction notices ever again. It was tempting. So tempting. But moving in with him felt like admitting that she couldn't make it on her own. It felt like giving up the independence she'd fought so hard to maintain. Can I think about it? Brielle asked. Of course. No pressure. But Brielle? I'm not asking you to move in because I think you need rescuing. I'm asking because I want to wake up with you every morning. I want to have breakfast with your kids. I want us to be a family officially. A family, Brielle repeated softly. If you'll have me. She kissed him instead of answering, pouring all her love and fear and hope into that kiss. When they pulled apart, Jonathan smiled. I'll take that as a maybe. It's a maybe leaning toward yes. That night, after Jonathan left and the kids were asleep, Brielle sat at her kitchen table with the key in front of her. This decision felt monumental. Moving in with Jonathan would change everything. Her children would get used to a certain lifestyle. They'd bond even more with him. And if things didn't work out? But what if things did work out? What if this was her chance at real happiness and she was too scared to take it? Brielle picked up her phone and called her brother, Deshaun. He was 3 years older and had always been her voice of reason. Sis, you know what time it is? He answered groggily. I need advice. About your billionaire boyfriend? He asked us to move in with him. Deshaun was quiet for a moment. What do you want to do? I don't know. Part of me wants to say yes immediately. But part of me is terrified. Of what? Of losing myself again. Of becoming dependent on another man. Of my kids getting attached and then losing another father figure. Those are valid fears. But Brielle, you can't live your whole life afraid. Sometimes you have to take a risk. What if it's the wrong risk? Then you deal with it. But what if it's the right one? What if this man is genuine and you miss out on happiness because you're too scared to try? After they hung up, Brielle sat in the darkness of her apartment. She thought about everything Jonathan had done for her. Every time he showed up. Every promise he kept. Every moment he chose her and her children. Maybe it was time to choose him back. Brielle told Jonathan yes on Christmas morning. She planned to wait until after the holidays, but watching him play with Amara and Elijah, seeing how naturally he fit into their little family, made her realize she didn't want to wait anymore. "We'll move in with you," she said as they sat by the small tree in her living room, wrapping paper scattered everywhere. Jonathan's face lit up. "Really? Really? But slowly, okay? The kids need time to adjust. We'll take all the time you need." They spent January packing and preparing. Jonathan hired movers to help, but Brielle insisted on doing most of it herself. She wanted to maintain some sense of control over the process. The penthouse felt enormous compared to her tiny apartment. The kids were amazed by their new rooms. Elijah spent an hour just running between his room and Amara's, shouting about how much space they had. But adjusting to living together wasn't easy. Brielle found herself clashing with Jonathan over small things. How to load the dishwasher. Where to put groceries. Bedtime routines for the kids. "You're hovering," Brielle snapped one evening when Jonathan tried to help Amara with her homework. "I'm helping. She doesn't need help. She's got this. I know what you were doing. But they're my kids, Jonathan. I'm their parent." The words hung in the air, heavy with unspoken meaning. Jonathan's jaw tightened. "I never tried to replace you," he said quietly. "I know. I'm sorry. I'm not used to sharing parenting duties." "You don't have to apologize. But Brielle, we need to figure out what our roles are here. Am I just your boyfriend who lives here? Or am I part of this family?" It was a fair question, and Brielle didn't have a good answer. The truth was she was still figuring it out herself. Things got more complicated when Brielle's mother came to visit. She walked through the penthouse with critical eyes, commenting on everything. "This is too much space for those kids. They're going to grow up spoiled." "They're fine, Mom. And you, living with this man without being married. What kind of example does that set? We're both adults making adult decisions." Her mother turned to face her. "Baby, I just don't want you to get hurt. Men like him don't usually stay with women like us." "Women like us? You mean black women?" "I mean women with kids and responsibilities. He's going to wake up one day and realize he can have anyone he wants. Someone younger, prettier, without all your baggage." The words cut deep because they echoed Brielle's own fears. After her mother left, Brielle locked herself in the bathroom and cried. Jonathan found her there 20 minutes later. "Your mom can be harsh. She's not wrong though. You could have anyone. Why settle for me?" "I'm not settling. When are you going to understand that?" "I'm 38, Jonathan. In 2 years I'll be 40. You'll still be in your early 30s. Eventually you're going to want more than I can give you." "Like what?" "More kids. A wife who doesn't have stretch marks. Someone who can keep up with you." Jonathan sat on the bathroom floor beside her. "You know what I wanted when I was 24 and running a company I was too young to handle? I wanted someone who understood pressure. Someone who'd lived through hard things and survived. I dated women my age. They were nice but we didn't connect. They couldn't understand why I worked so much or why I was always stressed." He took her hand. "Then I found you again. And you got it. You understood responsibility and sacrifice. You understood what it meant to keep going even when everything felt impossible. That's what I want, Brielle. Not youth or perfection. I want partnership. I want someone who makes me better. But the age difference doesn't matter. 8 years is nothing. My parents were 10 years apart and they were happy. Stop letting society tell you what our relationship should look like." Brielle leaned her head on his shoulder. "I'm being ridiculous, aren't I?" "You're being human. But yes, a little ridiculous." She laughed despite her tears. "Thank you for being patient with me. Always." The next morning, Jonathan asked Brielle to go somewhere with him. He drove them to Riverside Park, to the same bench where they'd met all those years ago. It looked different in daylight, peaceful and quiet. "Do you remember this place?" Jonathan asked. "Of course. How could I forget? That night, sitting right here, I was at my lowest point. I'd lost my mother. My father couldn't look at me. My friends didn't know what to say. I felt completely alone." He turned to face her. And then you sat down. A stranger who had every reason to walk past me. But you didn't. You stayed. You listened. You cared. I did what anyone would do. No, you did what you do. You see people in pain and you help them. That's who you are. And that's why I love you. Not because you're young or perfect or easy, but because you're kind and real and brave. Brielle felt tears streaming down her face. I don't feel brave. But you are. You survived an unhappy marriage. You raised 2 kids alone. You built a life out of nothing. And now you're trusting someone new even though it terrifies you. That's the definition of brave. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small black box. Brielle's heart stopped. I'm not proposing, Jonathan said quickly. Not yet. But I want you to have this. He opened the box to reveal a delicate gold bracelet with a single charm, a small bench. So you never forget where we started. And so you always remember that you're the reason I'm still here. Brielle let him clasp the bracelet around her wrist. She stared at the tiny charm so simple and perfect. I love you, she whispered. I'm sorry I keep doubting us. Stop apologizing. Just trust the process. Trust us. As they sat on that bench together, 14 years after their first meeting, Brielle finally let herself believe that this was real. That Jonathan Wright, billionaire CEO, genuinely loved her. Not for what she could give him, but for who she was. And for the first time she believed she deserved that love. 6 months after moving into the penthouse, life had settled into a comfortable rhythm. The kids were thriving in their new school. Amara had joined the art club and made several close friends. Elijah was excelling in his advanced reading program. Brielle had taken a new position at Wright Industries, working in community outreach. It turned out she had a natural talent for connecting with people and organizing programs. Jonathan had insisted on paying her a competitive salary, and for once she'd accepted without argument. Things with Curtis remained quiet. He called a few times to speak with the kids, but the conversations were awkward and brief. Mostly he seemed to have moved on with his life, which was fine with everyone. One Saturday afternoon in June, Jonathan gathered everyone in the living room. He looked nervous, which was unusual for him. I have something I want to talk to you all about, he said, sitting on the floor so he was eye level with the kids. Amara and Elijah exchanged curious glances. You guys know I love your mom very much, right? Dow, Amara said, rolling her eyes in that way only a 10-year-old could. You're always kissing her. Brielle blushed while Jonathan laughed. Fair point. But I also love both of you. You're smart, funny, kind kids, and I'm lucky to be part of your lives. We love you too, Mr. Jonathan, Elijah said seriously. Well, I was wondering how you'd feel if I became more official. Not just Mr. Jonathan, but maybe Dad. The room went silent. Amara's eyes went wide. Elijah looked confused. What about our real dad? Amara asked carefully. Curtis will always be your biological father. Nothing changes that. But he's not around very much and I am. I want to be here for everything. School plays, soccer games, scraped knees, good days, bad days, all of it. I want to be your dad in every way that matters. Amara looked at her mother. Mom, is this okay with you? Brielle's throat was tight with emotion. It's very okay with me. But it's your choice, babies. You don't have to decide right now. Elijah crawled into Jonathan's lap. Can I call you Dad now? Jonathan hugged him tight. If you want to. I want to. Elijah looked up at his sister. What about you, Amara? Amara was quiet for a long moment. At 10 years old, she remembered Curtis more clearly than her brother did. She remembered the fights, the empty promises, the day he left. But she also saw how different Jonathan was. How he showed up consistently. How he made their mother happy. How he loved them without reservation. Okay, Amara said finally. But can I still call you Mr. Jonathan sometimes? It feels weird to switch all at once. Jonathan smiled. You can call me whatever you're comfortable with. Amara nodded, then surprised everyone by getting up and hugging Jonathan. Thanks for staying. I'm not going anywhere, sweetheart. Brielle watched her children with the man she loved and felt her heart might burst. This was what family was supposed to feel like. Safe, warm, and full of love. That evening, after the kids were in bed, Jonathan took Brielle's hand and led her out onto the balcony. The city lights sparkled below them and the summer air was warm. I meant what I said earlier, Jonathan told her. I want to be their dad officially. And I want to be your husband. Before Brielle could respond, he knelt down on one knee. I know we said we'd take things slow. But Brielle, I can't imagine my life without you and those kids. You saved me once and you've been saving me every day since. Will you marry me? He pulled out a ring, simple and elegant with a single diamond. Brielle looked at this man who'd come back into her life after 14 years. Who'd refused to let her struggle alone. Who'd loved her children as his own. Who'd proven day after day that he was here to stay. "Yes," she said, tears streaming down her face. "Yes, I'll marry you." Jonathan slipped the ring onto her finger and stood, pulling her into a kiss that felt like a promise. When they finally broke apart, Brielle was laughing and crying at the same time. "I can't believe this is real," she said. "Believe it? Because this is just the beginning." They told the kids the next morning over pancakes. Amara screamed with excitement while Elijah wanted to know if he could wear a tuxedo to the wedding. Jonathan assured him he could wear whatever he wanted. Over breakfast, Jonathan brought up something else. "There's one more thing I'd like to do. With your permission, I'd like to formally adopt Amara and Elijah." Brielle nearly dropped her fork. "Adopt them?" "Yes. I want to be their father legally, not just in practice. It would mean Curtis would have to sign away his parental rights, which I'm guessing he'd be willing to do. But it's up to you." Brielle looked at her children, who were watching her hopefully. Legally adopting them would mean Jonathan would have all the rights and responsibilities of parenthood. If something happened to her, the kids would go to him, not to Curtis or her mother. "Let me think about it," she said carefully. Later, when the kids were occupied, Brielle called Curtis. He answered on the third ring, sounding surprised to hear from her. "What's up, Brielle? I need to ask you something. Jonathan wants to adopt the kids. Would you be willing to sign away your rights?" There was a long pause. "Are you serious?" "Completely. You haven't been involved in their lives. Jonathan has. He loves them and wants to make it official. And what do I get out of it?" There it was. The question Brielle had been expecting. "You get to be free, Curtis. No more child support obligations. No more guilt. You can move on with your life. You want me to just give up my kids? You already did that. I'm just offering to make it legal." Curtis was quiet again. Then he sighed. "Fine. Yeah, I'll sign the papers. They deserve better than me anyway." For once, Brielle agreed with him. "Thank you." The adoption process took 4 months. Curtis signed the papers without drama, probably relieved to be free of the financial obligation. The kids attended court hearings where the judge asked them questions about Jonathan and whether they wanted him to be their dad. Both children answered with enthusiasm. Elijah said, "He already is my dad. This just makes it real." Amara, more thoughtful, said, "He's shown up for us every single day. That's what a real parent does." On a cool October morning, the adoption was finalized. Judge Martinez signed the papers and congratulated the family. "Mr. Wright, you now have full parental rights and responsibilities for Amara and Elijah. Congratulations." In the hallway afterward, the kids were bouncing with excitement. Strangers smiled at their happy family as they walked out of the courthouse. "Can we celebrate with ice cream?" Elijah asked. "We can celebrate however you want," Jonathan said, scooping his son up. His son. Legally, officially, forever. That night, tucking both kids into bed, Brielle felt a peace she'd never experienced before. Her children were safe. They were loved. They had a father who would never abandon them. And she had a man who'd kept every promise he ever made. The wedding was planned for the following spring. Brielle wanted something small and intimate, but Jonathan convinced her to expand the guest list a bit. "Your coworkers love you. Your friends from the neighborhood miss you. Let's celebrate with everyone who matters." They settled on a spring wedding at a beautiful garden venue outside the city. Not too fancy but elegant. Brielle chose a simple cream-colored dress that made her feel beautiful. Amara would be the flower girl in a soft yellow dress. Elijah would be the ring bearer in his promised tuxedo. The months leading up to the wedding flew by. Brielle threw herself into planning while continuing her work at Wright Industries. She'd started a program connecting low-income families with job training resources, and it was growing rapidly. Jonathan was proud of her accomplishments. "You're making a real difference," he told her one evening as they reviewed her latest program metrics. "I learned from the best," Brielle replied, squeezing his hand. One February evening, 6 weeks before the wedding, Jonathan surprised her with a drive. He wouldn't tell her where they were going, just insisted she'd love it. They drove for about 40 minutes before pulling up to a gated property near a lake. The view was breathtaking, with water sparkling in the sunset and trees surrounding the area. "What is this?" Brielle asked. "Come see." He led her through the gate to a large, beautiful house. It wasn't as massive as the penthouse, but it was spacious and warm. There was a huge backyard with enough space for a swing set and garden. A treehouse sat in one of the large oak trees. Inside, there was a bright art studio and a room that would be perfect as a library. "I bought it," Jonathan said, watching her reaction. The penthouse is great, but I want the kids to have a yard to play in, space to grow. And I want you to have a real home, not just an apartment in the sky. Brielle walked through the house in a daze. Each room was perfect. She could picture Amara painting in the studio, Elijah climbing the treehouse, family dinners in the large dining room, holidays with everyone gathered around the fireplace. You bought us a house, she said, still processing. I bought our family a home. If you don't like it, we can look at others. But when I saw this place, I immediately thought of you. Of us. Brielle threw her arms around him. It's perfect. Thank you. You don't have to thank me. This is for all of us. They spent the next few weeks preparing to move again. This time the kids were even more excited. They each got to decorate their rooms however they wanted. Jonathan hired a contractor to build an even better treehouse in the backyard. The wedding day arrived with perfect weather. The garden venue was decorated with cream and green flowers. Chairs were set up in neat rows with an aisle down the middle. Brielle stood in the dressing room with her mother and her best friend Tracy, adjusting her dress for the 10th time. You look beautiful, baby, her mother said softly. It was the kindest thing she'd said in months. Thanks, Mom. I was wrong about him. He's good for you. Good for those kids. I'm sorry I doubted it. Brielle hugged her mother tight. Thank you for saying that. The ceremony was perfect. Brielle's brother walked her down the aisle. Amara scattered flower petals with a huge grin. Elijah carried the rings carefully, concentrating hard on not dropping them. And at the end of the aisle stood Jonathan, looking at her like she was the most precious thing in the world. The officiant, a woman named Reverend Michelle from Brielle's old neighborhood, spoke about love, commitment, and chosen family. She talked about how love doesn't always look the way we expect, but it's real when two people choose each other every single day. When it came time for vows, Jonathan went first. Brielle, you saved my life when I was 16 years old. You showed me kindness when the world felt cruel. You stayed with a stranger in the rain because you cared more about someone else's pain than your own comfort. That's who you are. That's who you'll always be. He took a breath. I spent 14 years looking for you. Not because I felt obligated, but because I knew, even as a kid, that you were someone special. Someone worth finding. And when I found you again, I saw that you were everything I remembered and more. Strong, beautiful, fierce, and kind. I promised to show up for you every single day. To love your children as my own. To support your dreams and celebrate your victories. To be your partner in everything. You saved me once. Let me spend the rest of my life showing you what that meant. Brielle was crying before he finished. She took a shaky breath and started her vows. Jonathan, when you knocked on my door last year, I was broken. I was scared, alone, and convinced I didn't deserve help. You refused to accept that. You kept showing up even when I pushed you away. You loved my children when their father didn't. You fought for us when I was too tired to fight for myself. I promised to trust you. To stop waiting for you to leave. To believe that I deserve this happiness. I promised to support your work, to be your partner, and to build a life with you that honors the kindness we showed each other all those years ago. Thank you for finding me. Thank you for staying. Thank you for choosing us. The officiant pronounced them husband and wife. When Jonathan kissed her, everyone cheered. Amara and Elijah rushed forward to hug them both, and the four of them stood together in a family embrace that felt like coming home. The reception was joyful. Brielle's co-workers danced with Jonathan's business partners. Neighborhood friends mixed with company executives. Tracy gave a funny toast about how Brielle had called her crying after meeting Jonathan, convinced it was too good to be true. And it was too good to be true, Tracy said, raising her glass. It was better than true. It was real. As the night wound down, Brielle and Jonathan stood on the balcony of the venue, watching their guests dance below. Happy? Jonathan asked, pulling her close. Happier than I ever thought possible. Good. Because this is forever. Forever, Brielle agreed. 6 months later, they were fully settled into the lake house. Amara had paintings hung all over her walls. Elijah had covered his room with glow-in-the-dark stars. The backyard was full of life, with a garden that Brielle tended and a swing set that got daily use. Brielle's program at Wright Industries had expanded to 3 cities. She'd been featured in a local magazine for her community work. Jonathan was proud of her every single day. One Saturday morning, the whole family was having breakfast on the patio. The sun was shining, birds were singing, and everything felt perfect. Mom, can we go to the lake today? Elijah asked. Sure, baby. We can pack a picnic. I'll help, Amara volunteered. Jonathan looked at Brielle across the table and smiled. This was what they'd built together. Not just a marriage or a house, but a life full of love, laughter, and hope. Brielle thought back to that rainy night 14 years ago when she'd sat with a grieving teenager in the park. She'd had no idea that small act of kindness would lead to this. To a man who loved her unconditionally. To children who were safe and happy. To a life that felt like a dream. But it wasn't a dream. It was real. And it was hers. As they cleaned up breakfast and prepared for their day at the lake, Brielle caught Jonathan's eye. He mouthed, "I love you," across the kitchen. She mouthed it back, her heart full. Kindness had led them to each other. Hope had kept them going. And love had brought them home. This was their happy ending. And it was just the beginning.